بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. I hope everyone is doing well, inshallah. First and foremost, I want to take a second to send our condolences to the family of Brother Arif and Sister Zainab, a family that are always here helping out with the different activities and the different programs that we have at the center, and their father-in-law, who we used to see so often here, and who is not with us anymore. I want to take a moment before we start tonight, inshallah, to recite Surah Fatiha for his soul and also for the family and Sister Zainab and those who this brother has left behind, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim wa lad-dallin. So as we were discussing, moving on with our understanding of the dunya. Like we mentioned, the premise of this discussion is that the more you understand from the dunya, the more you'll be able to prepare yourself and the better you will be able to react to the different situations, the different positions that the dunya will expose us to. And we've talked about this for a number of weeks now. I believe this will be our third or fourth week if I'm not mistaken. But truly, when you look at the verses of the Quran, when you look at hadith, and in particular the words of Ali ibn Abi Talib, you find that the words he has when it comes to the dunya are so much and so many that 4 or 5 sessions we will not be able to cover them. And inshallah, as we move on, we'll have to come back to this topic some other time. Inshallah, I think next week as well, I will continue with this topic, but then afterwards we will move on from this topic, inshallah. But it is a topic that the more you understand from it, the better you will be able to understand your position in this world. If we live in a culture, in a society, and we feel like many of the people living in this culture and in this society are completely lost, they have no idea why they're alive, they have no idea where they're headed, it's mainly because they don't understand what the dunya is, they don't understand where they're living their life. They don't understand where they are, right? And this takes us back to that famous hadith of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, Rahimallahu mra'an, may Allah have mercy on the one who knows where he came from, where he is in, and where he is headed. People don't understand the reality of this world, and not understanding the reality of this world is equal to, it immediately leads to one feeling lost in this world. Because you have one understanding of how the world is supposed to function, you have one understanding of how things are supposed to unfold. Then when you come to your life, you find that things are not unfolding that way. You get married, your understanding, as is the understanding of a lot of people who are newlywed, is that yes, it's going to be all nice and dandy, but then you go into life, you find that no, you have to make compromises, you have to make sacrifices. It's still beautiful, but it comes with difficulties, yes? You live your life, you have the understanding that once I get this degree, I'm going to graduate, then I'll get my job, everything will be fine, and then you see the dunya is doing things in a different way. So in order to not be lost, in order to not be surprised at how this dunya is doing things, we have to go to Quran and Hadith so that Quran and Hadith can tell us, listen, this is what the dunya is going to do to you. It's in one of the ahadith that we won't be covering tonight. Very beautifully, Ali ibn Abi Talib mentions this to a person who was essentially blaming the dunya. And he was saying, this dunya got the best of me. The dunya tricked me. I never knew that my life would come to an end this soon and that my life would have so many problems. The dunya tricked me into thinking that my life would be perfect and so on and so forth. it's interesting because in that hadith, and it's a longer hadith, Ali ibn Abi Talib says, listen, you're not the victim here, the dunya is the victim. You're not the one who the dunya in some sneaky way tricked you. The dunya was giving you signs and signals all the time. You just weren't listening. Yes? So if someone goes back to Quran and Hadith, they will understand what this dunya has in store. They will never be surprised by it, right? They will never be caught, off guard by what the dunya is doing to them. Let's start from here. We've talked about this a little bit in the previous weeks, and we'll continue with these verses and hadith as well. The shortness of this dunya, how temporary it is. I want to start out with the verses of the Quran because usually within our school of thought, in our communities, the Quran usually gets a smaller share and a smaller amount of time allocated to it compared to hadith. But when you go to the verses of the Quran, you find the skeleton, really the backbones of the religion. And that's why it's important for us to take a look at the verses of the Quran. Surah Taha, verses 102 to 104. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is painting a picture of what it's like when people gather on the Day of Judgment. And amongst the things that He pictures in this portrait for us, is that on that day, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is in charge now, there is only one source of authority on that day, things are very quiet. See, in this world, it's very busy, it's very distracted, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given authority and free will to all sorts of people. Yes, we have so many distractions in our life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the verses of the Quran, on that day, al-mulku yawma idhin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has all the power on that day. He has all the authority on that day. Yes? Because of that, the verses of the Quran say there's not much talk on that day. There's only one person who has to talk on that day. There's only one person whose speech actually matters. The Quran says, فَلَا تَسْمَعُ إِلَّا هَمْسًا. Ya Rasulullah, on that day, because it's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you hear others speak, it's kind of like they're whispering. Yes, you'll hear some whisper here and there. Otherwise, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's making decisions on that day. So here in verse 102 through 104, Surah Taha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is painting this portrait again. He says, يَوْمَ يُنْفَخُ فِي الصُّورِ, when we blow into the trumpet for the second time, وَنَحْشُرُ الْمُجْرِمِينَ يَوْمَئِذٍ زُرْقًا, and we raise the wrongdoers, we gather them. نَحْشُرُ means we gather them. And then يَتَخَافَتُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ, you will hear them whispering to one another. What are they whispering to one another? These same people who used to take the dunya as their main life, they used to plan so much for this life, they sacrificed everything for this world. They sacrificed everything for their wealth, for their position, for their career, yes? Even their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they sacrificed it, all of it for the dunya. Now that they have come to the akhirah, you hear them whispering on the Day of Judgment. What are they whispering to each other? Before I mention what they're whispering to one another, brothers and sisters, this is the beauty of the Quran. This is a book that will not only tell you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will not only tell you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring you into the Day of Judgment. It will not only tell you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He brings you into the Day of Judgment, there are going to be some who go to heaven, that some who might enter into hellfire. Even other holy books speak of these concepts. The Quran is a book that will tell you on the Day of Judgment, when everybody is quiet and someone is whispering, the Quran will tell you what that person is whispering. This is the beauty of the Quran. Yes? The Quran tells us the conversations that take place on that day. Other books don't tell us things of this nature to this detail. Yes, the concept of heaven and hell are there in other books. But do they tell us what that person is whispering to his group of friends on the Day of Judgment? No, this is the Quran. The Quran says that day everyone is quiet. يَتَخَافَتُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ, they start to whisper to one another. Why is it that they're whispering? Maybe out of fear, maybe out of the fact that now they see all the power is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't be loud anymore. Your voice doesn't hold authority anymore. يَتَخَافَتُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ, they start whispering amongst one another. Okay, so what are they whispering? يَتَخَافَتُونَ بَيْنَهُمْ إِن لَبِثْتُمْ إِلَّا عَشْرًا. They turn to one another and they say, you know what? You were only alive for like 10 days. Did these guys live for 10 days? No. Some of them lived for 80, 90 years. Some of them beyond that. When it comes to the previous the previous ummas, many of them lived for longer than that. During the time of Nuh alayhi salam, we know that people lived longer times. But they turn to one another. They say, you know what? We probably lived around 10 days. Nothing. It's like almost nothing. And then the Quran says, when these guys speak of their life in this world as 10 days, even in that they're wrong. Even in how short they assume that their life was in this world, they say 10 days, even though it was 100 years, for example. Even in that they are wrong. Why? Because the Quran says, نَحْنُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا يَقُولُونَ. We know exactly what they're saying, but here's the thing. إِذْ يَقُولُ أَمْثَلُهُم. But one of them will stand up and he will say, إِن لَبِثْتُمْ إِلَّا يَوْمًا. No, your life wasn't 10 days, it was a day. Now, the Quran is not saying that 10 days and a day. The Quran's not getting into this game of how many days it was. The Quran is saying something else. The Quran is saying that it cannot even be counted. Because one is the first number, yes? One is just something that exists. I mean, you lived, but can you count how long you lived? No. So don't say 10 or 9 or 8 or 12. إِن لَبِثْتُمْ إِلَّا يَوْمًا. Like, you can't even count it. It was a day. That's it. Does it reach 2 to start counting it? No, it doesn't even reach 2. The Quran is making a point here that these guys keep saying we lived 10 days. The Quran is saying you didn't even live a day, because this time that you lived in this world, it's not even comparable to what's going to come your way in the hereafter. Therefore, don't even put a number on it. Just say you lived. In labithtum illa yawma. You guys lived. But how long? 10 days, 12 days? Doesn't matter. It's so little. We'll just say you lived. That's what verses of the Quran are saying. I want to share a hadith with you from the life of Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Please recite the salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad wa ajjil farajahum. This is from a companion of his, or someone who was an acquaintance of his, by the name of Suwayd ibn Ghafala. And he says this happened between me and Ali ibn Abi Talib after Ali ibn Abi Talib had become Khalifa. He says, I went to visit him. When I went to visit him, دخلت على أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام بعدما بويع بالخلافة. After people came and gave bay'ah to him to become Khalifa. Okay, what happened? وَهُوَ جَالِسٌ عَلَى حَصِيرٍ صَغِيرٍ. And he was sitting on something that was made of wood. Hasir is kind of something that is made of, the branches of trees, and you would put it under yourself, or sometimes you might use it back home. They might use it because they want to create a shade for something, for the light that's showing inside of the house. It's like something that's made out of branches tied together. That's what they call hasir. And naturally, it's not soft at all, right? You're not sleeping on cotton, you're sleeping on branches, right? So it's difficult to sleep on them, right? It will, in some of the other ahadith we have, that the Prophet sallallahu wasallam, he used to sleep on hasir, and it used to leave a mark on his body. He says, I entered into the house, I saw Ali ibn Abi Talib is sitting on this piece of wood, or these branches that he has tied together. وَلَيْسَ فِي الْبَيْتِ غَيْرُهُ. And I looked around in the house and I saw there's no other furniture in this house. There's no other appliances. There's no other commodities in this house, yes? There's no other things that, people normally use to take care of their day-to-day situation and their day-to-day needs. His house seems very, very empty. And then he said this. فَقُلْتُ يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ بِيَدِكَ بَيْتُ الْمَالِ. I said, يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, I don't understand. You have Baytul Mal. Baytul Mal is in your hands. وَلَسْتُ أَرَى فِي بَيْتِكَ شَيْئًا. But when I look around in your house looks very empty. Yes? Some houses you go to, they're very empty. I remember growing up, this was something that, my parents they used to emphasize on it a lot. They used to always say, our house looks like a masjid. Because when you enter into a masjid, what do you see usually? The prayer hall is just an empty hall. So you have more people to fill in there. We used to say, our house is like a masjid in the sense that, there's not too many things in it. He says, I came to the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. وَلَسْتُ أَرَى فِي بَيْتِكَ شَيْئًا. I don't see anything in your house. And then he said this. Now, this is Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is not what's expected of us. but the mindset is expected of us. Having the right understanding, the approach is expected to us. Going to that extent, no, that's Ali ibn Abi Talib. But the approach and the mindset, that is expected of us. What did Ali ibn Abi Talib respond to him? What did he tell Suwayd ibn Ghafala about the fact that his house has next to nothing, almost nothing in it? He said this, Yabna Ghafala, O son of Ghafala, his name, Inna al-labib la yata'athathu fi darin nuqlah. He said a man of intellect doesn't bring out all of his furniture if he's on a trip. So beautiful. He says a man of intellect, if he's on a trip and he's just stopping somewhere, only thing he's going to get for himself is maybe a tent, because he knows he's going to have to wrap up things and move on. Why am I going to bring out all of my athath? Why am I going to bring out all of the things that belong to me here in this world? It's not where you set up things, you know? If you move into a hotel, what do? If you're in the hotel for 2 days, do you go back home and bring all your furniture and put it in the hotel? That's not what you do, right? You bring a suitcase, a lot of times you'll keep your clothes even in the suitcase. You won't even put it in the drawers that they have in the hotel room. You're only there for a day. Why are you going to take out your clothes and then put them back in? Why do that? He says, Al-labib la yata'athathu fi darin nuqla. A man of intellect, he doesn't go and grab all of his furniture and all of his commodities when he knows he's not staying here for too long. He puts it very beautifully. وَلَنَا دَارُ أَمَانٍ قَدْ نَقَلْنَا إِلَيْهَا خَيْرَ مَتَاعِنَا. Beautiful. He says, but you see, the thing is, we have this other place that we're going to go to. We have this other place of residence. I've moved all the wonderful stuff there already. It's already waiting for me. All the wonderful commodities and the furnitures and the pleasures and all that stuff, it's already moved ahead of me. I'm setting up over there because that's where I'm going to go and stay. وَإِنَّا عَنْ قَلِيلٍ إِلَيْهَا الصَّائِرُونَ. And in a very short time, we will all be moving in that direction. This is the mindset of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Shaykh, I can't buy furniture now. No, you can buy furniture. The mindset is that how much are you going to put into that? And is that going to be your number one concern when you wake up in the morning? That I buy this car and I buy this house and I tell you, the concerns of this world, they never end. Yes? For those who are Apple fans, you guys know. You might look at an Apple phone and say, well, if I could just have this iPhone, yes? And then you get the iPhone, you're like, you know what? If I could just have the iPad, I mean, they match together. You can send messages from one using the other one, the iMessages connect. If I could just have then you get the iPad, you're like, oh, this is too difficult to hold up. If I could have an iWatch, if I could just have an iWatch, the Series 6 just came out. If I can just have an iWatch, then you get that. Then you want something else that's paired with all of that. Then it just keeps going on and on and on. It never ends. That's the concerns of this dunya. You get that car, then you're like, well, let me add some style to it. Then you do that. Then you want to add some features to it, yes? Then before you know it, it's old, you want another one. It just keeps going. Just keeps going. And the one who doesn't understand this about the dunya, he's always lost in the dunya. He's always looking for something else that he will never get his hands on, because the dunya will come up with another thing for him. The list doesn't end. Ali ibn Abi Talib says in another beautiful hadith, he says, Ad-dunya muntaqilatun. He says, listen, this dunya is moving. It's in movement. It's not stationary. It's moving, and you're moving with it. And then he says this, so beautiful. He says, Faniyatun, it will perish. In baqiyat lak lam tabqa laha. He says, this dunya and the things that you gather around yourself, there's two problems. First of all, the things you gather for yourself, they may not remain for you. You gather them so that you can take pleasure in them, right? They may not remain for you. You make this money, maybe because someone comes and steals it. You make this money, maybe there's a fee penalty, you lose the money. Maybe you buy this furniture, God forbid, it catches on fire, for example. You buy a house, something happens to it. Yes, there's a flood, something happens to it. It says the first problem is, in baqiyat laka, even if it stays with you, lam tabqa laha, you're not going to stay around. Even if that thing sticks with you, you won't stick around to use it. That's the problem with it. One problem is just getting your hand on stuff and making sure that you can hold on to them. The next problem is even if you hold on to them, then you move on. They can't hold on to you. That's a problem you have with the dunya. This is the nature and the essence of the dunya. Now, as much as we talk about the dunya and we say, oh, this dunya is bad and this dunya is this and this dunya and that is that, as we mentioned in the previous sessions, we are not to understand this in this sense. That yes, if you want to be a man of the akhirah, if you want to be ahlul akhirah, then your dunya has to be miserable. No, that's not how it works either. Yes, there are compromises, there are sacrifices you have to make for the akhirah, but then you can have the dunya and you can have the akhirah. You might have a little less of the dunya, or maybe even you might have more of the dunya. That's also possible as well. But as long as your vision, as long as your main concern is the akhirah, then on the side you might just win this dunya as well. That's how it works. Your main concern has to be the akhirah. Will you get the dunya? Most of the times you will. Sometimes you will get more from the dunya than you would have gotten if the dunya was your main concern. As weird as that sounds. Religion, there are habits that it can build inside of you that can make you extremely successful in a professional career. Very much so. Sometimes you, even if you had the dunya as your main concern, you would make more, you would be able to take pleasure in more if the dunya was not your main concern. That can also happen. Okay, take a look at these ahadith. The verses of the Quran say, Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 200 to 202. It says, فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُم مَنَاسِكَكُمْ فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَذِكْرِكُمْ آبَائِكُمْ. When you guys are done with your hajj, with your umrah, the manasik of hajj, then remember Allah. And then the Quran says, when people remember us, they fall into two categories. One of those categories prays like this. This is what they ask for. Another one of these categories prays like this. And this prayer that the verses of the Quran are speaking about, these are not, literal supplications. The Quran is saying this is how they act in this world. Yes? Some of them demand this, some of them demand that. وَمِنْهُمْ فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا. Some people, with their actions, they say, Ya Allah, give us things in this world. In other words, their main demand is what? This world. They don't ever ask or never even work towards the akhirah. And what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might give them something in this world. وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. But he has no share waiting for him in the akhirah because he never worked for it. And then the Quran says this, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. O Allah, give to us in this world from your pure blessings. وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. And in the next world from your pure blessings. وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And protect us from the hellfire. The first one says, just give me in this dunya. The second one says, I want this dunya. I want your pure blessings in this dunya. And then I want blessings in the next world too. I want both of them together. And the Quran is saying this one is the one that we want. We want you to ask for this dunya and also ask for the akhirah. It doesn't mean if you're a man of akhirah, it doesn't mean if you're religious, you have to be miserable. That's not how it works. Yes, you have to make sacrifices. Yes, there will be compromises. But it doesn't mean you have to give up everything necessarily. Now take a look at the verses of the Quran, and this dua that we read is a dua that we always read in qunut, right? We teach our children this dunya, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. But if you pay attention to the wording of the Quran, you will find a special point that the wording has. They said the first group asked her what? يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا. Give us things in this world. They don't say آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً. They don't say give us good things in this world. They don't say give us blessings in this world. They are willing to have anything from this dunya, whether it's good, it's bad, it's halal, it's haram. Doesn't matter for this person. The second group though, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. Ya Allah, give me in this world, but give me from those things that are pure. This is the difference between the two. Yes? It's not just that one of them asked for the dunya and the other one asked for both. It's that the one who asked for both asked for halal in the both. That's the difference. The first one says, just give to me in this world. The second one says, atina fid dunya hasanatan. Give me pure things in this world. If it's haram, I don't want it. If it's not pure, I don't want it. وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And then the Quran says, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا. These guys, when they go to the next world, they'll have a lot waiting for them. The first group, they'll go to the next world. They won't have anything waiting for them. So as long as the person makes the next world his main concern, he should be fine. A couple more hadiths, and inshallah, we'll wrap up the hadith session. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. What happens now if I don't make the next world my main concern? I make this world my main concern. Like I said, sometimes if you made the next world your main concern, this dunya will come to you even more than it would have if you were just aiming for this world. As odd as that sounds, and as unlikely as that sounds, that's what Quran and Hadith tells us. But Quran and Hadith tells us this, that if someone doesn't put his concern on the next world, he puts his concern only and only on this world. That's his main concern. He's not concerned about anything else. What happens? The Quran says, as much as he tries to reach the dunya keeps running away from him. Even though this person's main concern is, I just want this dunya, and he's working hard for it, the Quran says the more he makes this world his main concern, the more the dunya will run away from him. Take a look at what the hadith says. The hadith says, عَلَيْكَ بِالْآخِرَةِ. Work for the akhirah. تَأْتِكَ الدُّنْيَا صَاغِرَةً. If you do that, the dunya with humility will come to you. You know how sometimes you want to go see a king? You don't tell the king to come to you, yes? You go to the king because the king has a higher status. But if the king is sitting there, what happens? The people come to him humbly. They present themselves. They are summoned. They present themselves. They say, yes, what is it that you needed from us? The hadith is saying, work for the akhirah. If you do that, the dunya will humbly present itself to you. The dunya will come to you. You don't have to work much for it. When I say work much for it, I mean you don't have to worry much for it. You still have to work. You have to work very hard, in fact. There is no such thing in Islam as, kicking your feet up and saying, oh, we're going to relax and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of it and good luck with that. That's not going to work because He's told us that's not going to work. You have to work hard, but you don't have to worry about it as much. You just put in the work. Whatever comes to your mind that you feel will take your career forward, that takes your wealth forward, you do it, and then you sit back and you feel like the dunya will come to you. عَلَيْكَ بِالْآخِرَةِ تَأْتِكَ الدُّنْيَا صَاغِرَةً. Okay, so what happens if I don't do this now? What happens if my main focus is this world? This hadith, brothers and sisters, is a short one, but you can kind of say it summarized the whole message of Islam when it comes to the dunya. Everything you need to know about the dunya from the Quranic and Islamic perspective, you can sort of say it's summarized in this short hadith of Ali ibn Abi Talib, which is mentioned in Ghurarul Hikam of Al-Amudi. He says this. He says, مَثَلَ الدُّنْيَا كَظِلِّكَ. He says the dunya is like your shadow. It's like the shade that's created when the sun is shining upon you. مَثَلُ الدُّنْيَا كَظِلِّكَ. This dunya is like your shadow. Okay, so what do you mean it's like my shadow? It's dark, is that what you're saying? What do you mean it's like my shadow? Now he explains. In talabtahu ba'uda. The more you start running after it, the more it will walk away from you. The more you try to catch up with it, the more it moves away from you. Imagine the sun is shining from your back. What happens? You have a shadow in front of you. The more you try to get to your shadow, what happens? The shadow obviously is moving forward with you, right? In talabtahu ba'uda. The more you worry about it, the more you concern yourself about it, yes? The more you give it priority over your akhirah, what happens? It moves more and more from you. وَإِن وَقَفْتَ وَقَفْ. But here's the thing. If you stop and you stop chasing it so much, the dunya will stop moving away from you too. What does that mean? That means that if you stop chasing it, then the dunya will be there for you. But the more you run after it, what happens? The more it moves away. Now I'll mention this one question before we end, inshallah. Just this one question. And that one question is this. But Shaykh, we see all these people, wealthy people. They move towards the dunya. They try to make money. They make a lot of money. Shaykh, last time we checked, you're not on the top 500, most, wealthy individuals in the world. Last time we checked, Jeff Bezos is, climbing up that ladder, partially because of this pandemic, but he's climbing up this ladder. Shaykh, I've seen so many people, we know, they work hard for the dunya and the dunya is given to them. What are these ahadith talking about? That the more you run after the dunya will start to run away from you. That's something we have to discuss in the next session. When these people make money, are they really reaching what they wanted to reach? Or is there more there that the Quran is unveiling for us, that hadith is unveiling for us, that the more you run after the dunya, the more the dunya distance itself from you, just like your shadow. But if you stop running, the dunya will be right there for you. How does this work with all these people who, for example, they want fame and they get their fame, They want money, they get their money. They want their popularity, they get their popularity. How does this work though? That's a question we have to discuss, inshallah, in the next session. With that, inshallah, I'll bring tonight's talk to an end in the hadith portion. I want to move on to the ruling section, and then from there we will end, inshallah. The first of we were discussing the mubtilat of prayer, the things that if you do, in prayer, that your prayer would become batil. Amongst those, we reached this point. Number 4 is speaking in prayer. Number 3 was the qibla. We said that if the qibla is in front of you, you cannot turn away from the qibla. Even if it's 10 or 15 degrees, the face and the body have to be facing the qibla. Okay? Now this doesn't mean that the qibla, you have to figure it out to the degree that it is. No, as long as you are generally facing the qibla, that's fine. But if I turn away from it such that people say he's not facing this direction, now he's facing 15, 20 degrees off, that's going to make my prayer batil because it's done knowingly. However, if I think the qibla is this way, and later on I found out that the qibla was not that way, the qibla was a different direction, until 90 degrees is going to be fine. More than 90 degrees is going to be a problem. If you find out in the middle of the prayer, you will stop what you are saying, turn back towards the direction, and then you will continue praying. Okay, that was number 3. Number 4 is speaking in prayer. We know that in salat you are only allowed to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are not allowed to speak to anybody else. Therefore, if someone knowingly speaks, this is going to make his prayer batil. If he accidentally speaks, then he has to do sajdatul sahw, which is what we discussed in our previous sessions. That means you do 2 sajdas, you get up and you say tashahhud and salam at the end of prayer. That's what he has to do. If someone enters and gives salam, you're praying. First of all, you cannot give salam to somebody if you're praying. Obviously, you cannot initiate that. If someone enters and gives salam to you, then what you need to do is you will have to sit and wait to see if others there respond to this person. If they don't respond to this person and you're sure that this person was giving salam to you, then you will respond only with salamun alaykum. That's the only thing you should use. And I say that because different scholars have different opinions here. Some of them say you can only use this phrase. You shouldn't even say alaykum as-salam, just salamun alaykum. If no one responds to this individual and this person was giving salam to you, then yes, it is wajib for you to respond the salam, but only in this format. Okay. Moving on, number 5 is laughing. If someone laughs in prayer, their prayer does not automatically become batil. The type of prayer, the type of laughter that is loud, yes, and makes the person leave the form of salat, okay, this person, his prayer becomes batil, even if it's not done in a intentional manner. Okay? So there might be sometimes you're praying, maybe someone says something, someone does something. The most innocent example of this that I could find is sometimes, maybe you have a little child in the house. The little child does something that's just really, really cute and interesting, and in the middle of your prayer, you might, the laughter might start. If the laughter is something that you can control, you control it and you move on with your prayer. This is not going to make your salat batil. It's haram for you to end your prayer there and say, I'll just do it all over again. You're not allowed to do that. Yes, if it reaches a point where you start changing colors now, you start turning purple, or you're laughing so loud that people say this guy's not even praying anymore, then your prayer is batil, and then you will make up for it. And obviously doing that on purpose is going to be a problem, definitely. And the last one that we'll cover for today, inshallah, is crying. Crying, if it's done for the akhirah, if it's done for Imam al-Hussein, even with the intention of it being an act of worship, all of that is fine in prayer. If someone cries for things that have happened in this world, losing a loved one, the difficulties that they're going through. Maybe someone is just dealing with depression, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing them with this. And we've talked about mental health issues here and there. I'll just say this, that these are tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean this person is a bad person. No, it's the same way you and I might, God forbid, get into an accident. Our physical health is tested. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes will test the mental health of a human being. Yes, the faith that a person has, it does affect the mental health, and vice versa. These are possible. We are a very sophisticated creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our different aspects, they do interact with one another. But it's not to say that if someone has mental health issues that they're dealing with, they're struggling with, that this person, their faith has a problem. That's not how it works. The same way if this person's physical health had an issue, no one would sit there and say the faith of this person has a problem. It's not necessarily like that. If someone is struggling with this and they start to cry in the prayer, according to Ayatollah Sistani, he says that if the crying is in a way that is not on purpose, so it's because of one of these issues that we mentioned, as long as they can control it and continue with their prayer, that's fine. If they cannot, then yes, meaning that if the crying takes over them, right? Means they're crying so much that when people look at this person, they say this person is crying. They're not praying anymore, right? So it's a heavy crying. If that happens, yes, the prayer becomes batil. But if it's a tear or two, then that shouldn't be a problem, and they can continue with the prayer because it's not intentional. It's something, maybe you're reminded of a loved one, maybe you remind this person or that person. So crying in salat, it is one of the mubtilat, but not in all the situations. Only in this situation that I mentioned, according to Ayatollah Sistani at least. And this is a common misconception that we have, that the moment you cry, for example, even if it's a tear, your prayer is batil. Or for example, the moment you laugh, your prayer is batil. No, these depend on, first of all, them being intentional, and number two, that they take over, even if they're not intentional, but they take over the form of prayer. That people look at you and they say, he has now left the form of prayer. He doesn't look like someone who's praying anymore. Then yes, you would have to stop the prayer and redo the prayer at that point. Inshallah, with that, we'll bring tonight's talk to an end. Let's take a moment to recite Surah Fatiha for all of your marhumin and marhumat, especially the father-in-law of our dear brother Arif, with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين